Good evening and welcome to RFL. I'm Richard French. Well, Election Day, believe it or not, is exactly 8 weeks from today. That means Joe Biden and President Trump, they've got 56 days to make their closing arguments to the American public. And as we hit the home stretch, the candidates, they're ratcheting up the rhetoric, going after each other directly.
Joe Biden, the radical socialist Democrats would immediately collapse the economy. If they got in, they would collapse it. You'll have a crash the likes of which you've never seen before.
President Trump keeps talking about how great this economy is, how great the stock market is. Well, the only reason he didn't have the guts to take on COVID and threw up the white flag, he was worried if he started talking about saving people's lives, the stock market may fall.
So you can see, not a lot holding back here. Let's bring our senior political correspondent, Andrew Whitman, to set the stage here. Where are we, Andrew, with 8 weeks out?
You know, it's fairly remarkable, Rich, for election cycles. There hasn't been a lot of movement in the overall poll numbers. Not much has changed, and we can put to rest the notion of any bounces from the conventions. The race for the White House continues to hold relatively steady 8 weeks out, and that steady remains good news for Joe Biden. He wins in 71% of simulated elections, wins an average of 321 electoral votes, 50 more than he would need, the 270 he would need to win. Biden also enjoying a 7.5-point lead in the polling average. And Biden's 7.5-point lead ties him for the largest lead this century with 56 days to go. George W. Bush was also up 7.5 points at this point in 2004, and that election worked out fairly well for him. But of course, elections are won in the states, not nationally. Politico identifying the 8 states it thinks will decide the election. Only minor surprises on the list are Minnesota, which Trump is trying to poach, and Georgia, which Biden is looking to steal. But Biden leads right now in 7 of these 8 states, trailing only in Georgia. But this list of states not as comfortable for Biden as it might appear. For example, a new Pennsylvania poll has Biden up just 2 and within the poll's margin of error. Another new poll out of Florida has the race there a flat tie, with Trump flipping Latino voters there. He leads by 4 among Latinos, but he lost Florida Latinos by 27 points in the last election. Similarly, Biden leads among Florida seniors by 1 point. That's a group that Trump won by 17 points last time out. And while it was always a given that the race would tighten from the Biden landscape polls we were describing this summer, the Trump campaign has spent a lot of money to help keep the president's numbers within striking distance. But that came at a cost. The Times today out with a piece describing how the Trump campaign lost its huge money advantage that it had over Biden. Times also has numbers. Team Trump raised more than $1.1 billion for his reelection to date, but the campaign has already spent more than $800 million of that. They're not exactly broke, but the campaign did take some TV ads off the air to try and save money. And all of this as the Biden campaign raised a staggering $364 million just in August, giving them the best fundraising month in the history of American presidential elections. And there's word tonight of another liability that the Trump campaign is worrying about tonight: the president himself, or at least his constant complaints about voting by mail and the worries about voter fraud. His efforts have worked so well that the top Republican in the House, Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy, told a reporter with Axios that he warned the president about his voting rants. Quote, "I tried to show President Trump, you know who is most afraid of COVID? Seniors. And if they're not going to vote, period, we're screwed. We could lose based on that." And as we showed you earlier, Trump trails Biden among seniors, at least in Florida. Even Republican governors now quietly trying to encourage their voters to vote by mail, this despite all of the president's warnings. Rich?
You know, Andrew, as we're sitting here, we have a live shot. We're going to bring this up. This is in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. And I think in many ways, this picture tells a lot of stories. It tells who, as they're waiting for President Trump to land and speak at this rally, who are the president's voters, pure and simple. They're almost entirely white. I haven't seen a face that's not. And I'm searching here for masks. I think I can see a couple, but that's about it. In many ways, that tells the story for where we are in the last 8 weeks. COVID, a huge issue in this election for all the obvious reasons. We'll talk more about where we are with the pandemic as school opens for a lot of kids today. But the president has doubled and tripled down on it, saying, mocking even people who wear masks, including Joe Biden. And he's playing the grievance card right now, that law and order, and that they're out to get you and your way of life. And Biden pushed back against that in a speech in Pittsburgh last week, but nonetheless, I think we're going to hear a lot more of that. In many ways, symbolic where we are tonight.
I mean, it's amazing when you think of the biggest issues in this election, whether it's the economy, whether it's the overall state of healthcare, the protests that we've seen and racial issues. The virus and the virus response undergirds all of those issues. I mean, it impacts every other issue that's on the docket. And Trump has yet to come up with a way to show people that he's contained this thing. He keeps floating the possibilities of vaccines that are coming before the scientists say that they're ready. It's a real problem for him. And, you know, what we're seeing in Winston-Salem tonight, a town not really known for healthy lung behavior,
Yes.
a lot of people at risk.
Smoke them if you got them. Now, listen, this hour, Andrew and I are going to go over, there is a volume of books that have come out, and none of them favorable for the president, by including family members of the president, let alone people the president hired and worked for his administration, and even his fixture. We'll talk about what's in there, but also the most devastating article that's come out from The Atlantic, that talking about what the president had to say regarding American soldiers who lost their lives in defense of this country, calling them, among other things, suckers and losers. I believe that will have a major impact here in the closing weeks of this election. Plus, obviously, we've got a debate coming up. But Andrew touched on those swing states. Pennsylvania, right at the top of the list. Joe Biden from neighboring Delaware here. Obviously, the president spending a lot of time in Pennsylvania as well. They know how important that is and how it could be one of those swing states. I can't think of a better person to bring in now than to discuss where Pennsylvania is and where we are in this race. Ed Rendell. He is the former head of the Democratic National Committee. He's also former governor of Pennsylvania. The Democrat joins us now. Governor, you comfortable with the direction the Biden campaign's going? I see the national numbers, but I look at Pennsylvania, and some polls have it within even the margin of error. For those people worried about the law and order aspect of the campaign, did Biden do enough in that Pittsburgh speech, and what more do you want to hear from him in the last 8 weeks of this campaign?
Well, I thought the Pittsburgh speech was great, but he needed to put it on TV, and the ad that came out the following day was a very good, strong ad. And I think it was the ad they've spent the most money, put the most money on the air of all the ads in the campaign. So I think they did the right thing.
I don't know about you, but I've heard from some folks who can't stand Trump, but say, you know, I can't have Portland happening in my city here. I don't like the guy, but I need to feel safe. I don't think that's imagined, especially in these 8 battleground states we keep talking about. What does he have to do more than just keep saying it to convince people that he's not the Antifa candidate or whatever else? Does he have to walk a thin line between the progressive part of the party and the moderates?
Well, look, I don't think it's a progressive or moderate issue. I think we have to just explain to the voters, Donald Trump says he's going to take care of it. Well, who's the president right now? Who's been the president for the last 100 days when there have been problems in Portland? Donald Trump. Did he take care of it? No, he not only didn't take care of it, but he contributed to it. He motivated it in many different ways. So you need a different approach, a totally different approach that Donald Trump's not going to give you, and Joe Biden will.
How do you run against Trump when every day there's a new controversy or a new scandal? In that, I mean, take the comments that came out of the Atlantic article attributable to this president, losers and suckers, those who gave their lives for this country. If you're Biden, you could make that an issue for an entire week, but then you're not talking about some of the pocketbook issues or safety issues that we've been talking about. How do you navigate the craziness that is this news cycle between now and the last 56 days of this campaign?
Well, it's why Donald Trump had to run against, no question about it. But I think this military thing that you referred to is different than the rest of Trump's abuses. I think, first of all, it sounds exactly like him. If you listen to his comments about John McCain that were made on television, that I don't think a guy's a war hero because he gets captured. I like my war heroes who don't get captured. Well, not only was that idiotic because John McCain's plane was shot down and he happened to land in North Vietnamese territory. You know, he'd had nothing to do with being captured. That was just the way fate dealt with it. Not only was it idiotic, but boy, was that unpatriotic. John McCain spent 5 years in a prison camp. He could have gotten out in 1 or 2 months if he was willing to accept the fact that he would be released because his father was an admiral before the men under his command were released. He wouldn't do that and spent 5 years in a prison camp, suffered damage to his arm that was never repaired. John McCain was a true American hero. So the phrases that Trump used describing McCain are the same phrases that the Atlantic article reports he used about our troops: losers, suckers.
To that end, debates going to be coming up later this month. I saw one poll that thinks that Trump will do better by a small margin, but they think that he'll do better in the debates. You always want low expectations, I know, going into these. But you know Joe Biden personally, call him a friend. Do you think people are going to be surprised how he's going to do it? And would you counsel him, unlike others, that if or when Trump goes personal or when he goes in the gutter here, should Biden go right back in there, or does he take the high road? How would you counsel Biden? Get in a street fight or try and act like the presidential, one of the two?
Well, I think for Biden, it's important that he looks tough, that he responds tit for tat. As you pointed out in the law and order controversy, people say, well, Joe Biden may be too nice. He may be too soft to restore law and order. I think Joe's got an opportunity in those debates to show Americans he can be tough as nails. And the Joe Biden that I know is tough when he's standing up for people's rights, is tough when he's standing up to provide safety for the American people. So it's a good opportunity for Joe, and I would have him, if Trump hits him below the belt, hit him right back.
What would you counsel the party, the Democratic Party, with the chaos that most of us believe we're going to be dealing with here on election night, especially if Trump declares himself the winner early, et cetera, for how long it might take to process these mail-in votes? I've heard one school of thought, Ed, who says, hey, you know what, there's a risk, but you know what, it's worth it given the consequences. Turn out in person as much as you can, vote early if you're available to, but don't mail in voting unless it's a last resort. On the other hand, we just told people what Congressman McCarthy apparently is saying. He's telling Trump, we might have screwed the pooch here. We're scaring the very people we need to vote for us, these seniors, and they're not going to mail in vote consequently here. We and down-ticket Republicans could be hurt. How do you think this plays out, and what do you think the Democratic Party should message voters in terms of how to vote?
I think voters should vote in the way they feel most at ease. If they're afraid of contracting the virus, they should vote by mail. And I think it makes sense for people to vote by mail. Wisconsin primary, you remember, the Democrats pleaded with the courts to allow them to have mail-in voting. The courts wouldn't do that. Democrats came out. They won the statewide Supreme Court election. But I think 6 people attracted COVID from just going to exercise their right to vote. What we need to do is indoctrinate the public. That since more Democrats are going to vote by mail than Republicans, and that was shown in all the primaries, we should alert the public that it's possible for the Republican candidate to be ahead on election night with the in-person votes, but lose the mail vote because so many more Democrats are going to vote by mail than Republicans. We've got to make that clear to the voters before it happens. And so if we're behind on election night, that doesn't mean we've lost, because the majority of ballots are going to be mailed in. And Democrats are going to mail in ballots 2 or 3 to 1 times more great than Republicans.
4 years ago, with about 2 months out compared to now, are you more or less confident today than you were 4 years ago as it relates to the Democrats' win in November?
No, I'm not overconfident by any means. I think if the election were held today, we'd win probably about 330 electoral votes and probably win the popular vote by 5 million. But 56 days is a long time in politics, and Donald Trump is very good at going on the attack. So every Democrat, every independent, every Republican who wants to see Donald Trump defeated has to make sure they vote. It has to make sure everyone in their family votes, and all their friends vote, and all their coworkers vote. Because I said when we were ahead 3 or 4 points in Pennsylvania, I said we could lose the state. And we did by less than a point. We did. So don't underestimate Donald Trump. Don't ever estimate Donald Trump.
And you notice the governor didn't tell you to vote twice like the president did. But Governor Rendell, I always appreciate the few minutes with you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Richard.
All right, everybody, when we come back here, we talked about this with the governor just a minute ago. As the president continues to deny the report in the Atlantic magazine saying he called fallen U.S. soldiers, among other things, suckers and losers, We're going to show you his history when it comes to disrespecting the military and also how active duty soldiers feel about their commander-in-chief. I'll give you a hint, they're not impressed.